Now go back to our story in Luke 7. Should have sent you back there a moment ago, but Luke chapter 7, verse 4. I just want to point out something we've talked about a moment ago, but I want to bring back to your thinking. The crowd came to Jesus in verse 4, and they begged him earnestly, saying that the one for whom he should do this was worthy. And why did they think he was worthy? Because verse 5 makes that pretty clear. He's worthy because he loves our nation and he has built us a synagogue. And so that got me to thinking, why did the crowd assume that this centurion was worthy? And they answer the question for me. Because this centurion had shown himself full of the works of the people of God. And so their assumption was, because he loved God enough to build a church, essentially, hey, you ought to do it for this guy because he built our church for us. Doesn't sound near as, it sounds a little shady when you say it that way, doesn't it? You ought to love this guy because, he built our church and we ought to show him some respect. That's essentially what they're saying to Jesus. Jesus reluctantly starts to head that way, and then you and I see the man come out and say, I'm not worthy. But I also want to pause for a moment and take a look at why they would think this man was worthy, and it's because Israel began to see worthiness as the end result of what you do. The more you do, the more worthy you are. You build a church, well, that makes you really worthy. Now, does that sound like the religion that most of us came up under? Well, I can't answer for you, but I can answer for me. And it sounds a lot like what I heard called the gospel. I put that in air quotes because I don't think it's good news that God responds in turn to how good I've been. Because by default, if God has to respond to me when I'm good, what do you think God does when I'm bad? And listen, that's where we came up with karma. What comes around goes around, man. Put good out in the world and good will come back to you. And you know what? There is some truth to put good out in the world and it'll come back to you. Absolutely. You treat people with kindness, they'll probably be kind back to you. You treat people like a dog, get ready. Somebody's probably going to bring that right back at you. And that's what caused people to think, you know, what comes around goes around. But, and in that sense, I agree. But in a spiritual sense, like God does for man what man does for God, to me, if that's God's economy, I have to ask myself why Jesus even bothered. What's the point of going to the cross for the rest of us if the rest of us can move the heart of God by building a church? And yet, that's a sound of a lot of the religion that has rang in our ears for so many years, which is, what have you done for God? Don't come to God and ask God to do something for you. I'm going to ask you, what have you done for God? And if you haven't done anything for God, it's probably a good time to get out your checkbook. Or it's probably a good time to sign up for this class. Or it's probably a good time to join our evangelism team. Or it's and man, we can just list thing after thing after thing, and we go, hey, I've heard that. I was part of one of those. Not that any of those things are bad, but they become a problem when they convince us a man is worthy because he does them, and a man is unworthy because he doesn't do them. And what I see in Luke 7 is a crowd convinced that the centurion's worth talking to because he's put a little coin down for the church. And we've all seen that happen. That's, by the way, the society of the world. That is how the natural kingdom works. The kingdom of God doesn't work as a reciprocal kingdom. I do for God, God does for me.